Hello, I'm John Feldt. Welcome to the Blue Water Outlook, weekly water outlook for April 21st, 2013. Well, let's start off by looking at a big picture of the rain over the last week. And as you can see, even though there was some rain over the southeast U.S., it definitely wasn't the real hot spot. The Midwest received quite a soaking rain, producing in some major flooding in spots. Red is 5 inches or more. But if we look at the southeast U.S., we definitely see a couple things of interest here. I'd like to point out that the heaviest rain extended from Louisiana across southern Mississippi and Alabama. 2 inches of rain with some areas of 3 and even 4 in spots over southern parts of those areas. Then as we moved further east, you can see that it dropped off quite a bit over northern Georgia, just a half inch or so up to maybe an inch. And then as we went into the Carolinas, continuing that pattern we've seen for quite some time, it's really dropped off, and that area of blue is only up to about a half inch. A couple other interesting things here. You might note that there's some streakiness here. We're beginning to get spring-type convection and thunderstorms. Also wanted to point out it appears that rainfall was enhanced over higher elevations, and that will occur year-round, not just during the spring months. Percent of normal precipitation over the southern areas of the southeast U.S., above normal precipitation, and quite a bit below normal precipitation over fairly large parts of the Carolinas. Now, if we look at the soil moisture right now, what we see are the areas in green are adequate or even surplus soil moisture, and very dry conditions in those shades of brown. And I guess what I want to point out here is a trend that's been going on for quite some time now over the southeast U.S. From west to east, where areas of Alabama and particularly northwest Georgia, western Georgia, receiving ample soil moisture recharge over the winter months. And then very abruptly, as we push off into the east, sort of towards the middle part of the Savannah River Basin on east, along the coastal parts of the Carolinas and southeast Georgia, much drier, as well as almost all of Florida. Now, there was some severe weather on a couple days. I printed out a couple days of severe weather. Red is indicating possible tornadoes, green would be indicating hail, and blue would be wind. And this was definitely a wind event over a couple days over the last week, primarily over the central and eastern parts of the Carolinas and much of Virginia. Now, the average departure of greenness, very splotchy over the southeast U.S., areas of green are areas that are greener than normal. Areas of yellow are areas that are drier or less green than normal. And that can be caused by a couple things, both temperature and moisture. And I think what you're seeing here, this area of yellow here, remember how I was showing how this has been drier than usual in this area here? And thus, things aren't greening up as quick as possible. Look at over parts of Mississippi. I mentioned that's been wetter than normal. That is also greening up quicker than normal for this time of year. Now, stream flow, taking a big perspective here, you can see in the Midwest the very high stream flow. But over the southeast U.S., it ranges a bit. We have some areas in red and yellow that's below normal. We have a few areas of blue that's above normal. But generally speaking, if you average all these, it looks like for the most part we're fairly close to normal over most regions. Now, there's some exceptions. If you look closely at the middle and lower Savannah River Basin, well below normal stream flow. Parts of the Carolinas, we still have some pockets over the eastern part of below normal stream flow. And then as we get to the west, over parts of Mississippi, Alabama, we're getting in above normal stream flow. So that's sort of been the story. If we get in down to Florida, you can see even though some areas are near normal, most of the area is below normal stream flow. Now, I did mention a few times over the Midwest the high flood range, which purples major flooding. I did want to show over the southeast U.S. there are a few spots that are showing high flows. Those are in yellow, and the area in orange there is some minor flooding. But considering we're now exiting the spring flood melt season, or not spring snow melt, the spring flood season, for the most part, this is pretty modest. I've seen a lot more than this exiting winter, and we are getting very close to that green up now, and that's going to really have the potential for flooding going down very, very significantly over the next couple of weeks. So it looks like this has been a well below normal spring flood season, and once we get that green up really going over the next couple weeks, we're going to be looking at more localized flooding, and the risk of main stem river flooding will decrease quite significantly. Here's the drought monitor. Well, that's really changed quite a bit. I'll probably talk about that in my newsletter coming up real soon, but pretty much the drought has ended over Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. It's beginning to expand because of that dryness once again over parts of the Carolinas, and a little bit more significant in Florida as well. But we've seen some very significant improvement over Georgia over the last month or so. Okay, so let's talk about the forecast. Mentioned last week we were going to go into a positive Arctic oscillation, which we did. You can see here that we are now at the peak of that positive Arctic oscillation right here. And it's forecast to sort of get back into neutral as we get into May. And as I also said, more and more, especially once we get into May, the Arctic oscillation won't bring as many changes to our weather as smaller scale features will. I also put the mean temperature anomaly, the 7-day mean, and you can almost see here that it's not quite what you'd expect from this positive Arctic oscillation with this very cold air up over the Midwest. But on the other hand, the jet stream has lifted north, and I'll show that in just a minute, and you can see the warmer air has pushed up over the eastern U.S. Now, this is that jet stream I talked about, and I wouldn't call this the classic positive Arctic oscillation. It's sort of modified, but it does show that the jet stream has lifted pretty much north of our area over the southeast U.S., and thus most of the energy will also remain to our north. Now, we'll get bits and pieces of that, and we will have some chances of precipitation, but without that jet dipping south and ejecting some pulses of energy our way, it's going to limit the overall duration and quantity of precipitation. These are the tracks of lows, and that also shows that these tracks of lows are to our north. And if we really wanted to get more widespread significant precipitation, these lows would have to come out in a track like this, or perhaps even across here. And without that, that's going to limit precipitation. So here's the rainfall forecast for the next 7 days. It does show that some of that energy that we'll be pushing out will be producing some precipitation over parts of the southeast U.S. I think there's a low confidence in these amounts this week. I think there's quite a bit of uncertainty of where this heavier rainfall will eject. It could be further to the north, I suspect. But I think this pattern here of really dropping off further east is actually pretty strong. And what we see here are southeast Alabama, south Georgia, and good parts of the Carolinas don't receive all that much significant rain over the next 7 days. Here's a peek at week 2, the rainfall over week 2, and even though there are some chances of rain, it again looks fairly quiet and modest over most of the southeast U.S. This can change very drastically as we get from week 1 into week 2. This is pretty far out there, but right now it doesn't look overly active over the southeast U.S. It does look like there will be some precipitation, but nothing all that significant. So the takeaway points for this week's briefing: energy and storm tracks are mainly to our north. There will be some scattered showers and thunderstorms midweek and perhaps again late in the weekend. But right now, amounts look like they will be fairly modest, and from a soil moisture perspective and runoff perspective, at very best we'd be holding our own, possibly over most of the area, especially eastern parts of the southeast U.S., actually reducing upper soil moisture levels. Thanks for listening to this week's briefing. I will be updating this in about a week.